Today, we wanted to do a follow-up episode. One of our previous episodes with just Josh and myself was on how to raise seed funding for your health tech startup. And that episode had about 8 million views. And so we could tell, okay, that's obviously a really great episode. And so we wanted to do a follow-up today on raising a Series A for your health tech startup, which only seems natural as a progression. To start, Josh, I want to frame the discussion. I want to make it clear for everyone. We're talking about a health tech or healthcare technology company, not just a regular Series A. It's not just every industry, and every industry is obviously different. But I'm wondering if you can maybe start the discussion with your explanation on what's different in particular about health tech and how you think about that as opposed to other industries or compared to other industries.
Yeah, for sure. And I think when we hear a lot about startups and venture financing in general, there's a lot of good information out there that applies to, let's call it, typical tech startup or software company. Healthcare is definitely different, and so even though we are primarily a software company and operating in healthcare, the types of things that investors look for is actually quite different than for a traditional software company. And a lot of, not just the metrics, but even just the milestones that matter in healthcare are very different than traditional tech or software companies. And a lot of it comes down to the fact that what's needed for adoption in healthcare is quite different. So, in healthcare, clinical evidence matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in our space, our customers, which are health systems, really care about, have you proven with real analyses done by other, academic hospitals that this does reduce length of stay or readmissions or improve patient satisfaction? What's the quality of those studies, right? Was it a pre-post evaluation? Was it a randomized control trial? Were the variables controlled in the study well? And in any other industry, no one's really looking at that sort of rigor when it comes to evidence, right? They're just like, oh, is there a business case study by another customer?
Right.
So that's one thing. And I would say a second big difference is that there's other technology advancements in healthcare that are considered differently than in other software companies. So in another software company, Alan, integrations are a very common thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Every product can integrate with like Salesforce and Slack and all these other big companies. But in healthcare, very few companies have actually directly integrated with Epic and Cerner, for example, the way SeamlessMD has.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I were to pitch SeamlessMD to a non-health tech investor and they hear about the fact that we have, about 20 clinical studies or evaluations, that's not impressive to them. Or if we bring up the fact that we're direct integration partners with Epic or Cerner, they're probably wondering, why don't you have 100 of those types of
Right.
integrations with 100 other vendors?
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not as excited about those milestones. But when we were raising our Series A, Alan, and we were sharing those types of milestones with health tech investors, they're saying, "Holy crap! That's really amazing. Very few companies have accomplished that level of clinical evidence, and very few companies have accomplished that level of integrations with the big EHR vendors because they come from health tech. They know how hard that is."
Right.
And so I think that it takes finding the right type of investor who appreciates the complexities of healthcare to raise a proper Series A. And I think it's also important, Alan, that when they get that those are important things in health tech, then as you grow your business with that investor as a partner, they're also on the same page with you in terms of like the company roadmap and the product roadmap and all the other milestones that you're going to work on in the future together.
Right. Yep. And I imagine it's somewhat of an active discussion going back and forth with them and understanding, what are certain milestones that we've hit today, and then what are milestones that we're looking to hit with the Series A and beyond. Would you be able to talk a little bit about when it's important to raise a Series A? At what point in time do you do it? So if you remember from our previous discussion on the seed round funding, the most important thing is to go out and solve the problem. And so operate as if the finance isn't there, solve the problem. If you can gather some seed funding, that's even better. It helps you with those goals. But at what point do you decide, okay, now is time to actually go out and raise a Series A? Does it just come down to money, or what's important there?
Yeah, and by the way, like I think one of the challenges with raising investor capital is that there's all these terminologies such as seed funding, Series A, Series B. A little bit of it's just frankly semantics. It's like what is the order of financing that you've done, and then like what's the next letter in the alphabet. I think theoretically, the point of a Series A in general, let's forget healthcare for a second. The point of a Series A is to say, okay, this company has a product that works. It's got it's proven a clear value proposition for customers. It's got a handful of customers. It's got a business model that has pretty good evidence that it's working. And the point of a Series A is to kind of start to scale up the business and demonstrate that you can have a repeatable business model, repeatable engine to grow the company. So usually when people are raising a Series A in general for a company, health tech or not, you're usually growing out your sales and marketing team, often for the first time, like building a real sales marketing team to help commercialize the business further. And I think it's very, and then also the other definition really is that typically a Series A is when you've raised your, a real, what they call institutional round of funding, meaning that you're actually raising money from institutional investors such as a venture capital firm, right? Or a major investment fund. Whereas usually in a seed round or earlier, you're either raising from individual angel investors or maybe a very small seed focused fund. I would say that's pretty similar in health tech. So for us, when our Series A, it was the first time that we raised significant dollars from, more institutional venture capital type funds. So, for example, like MedTech and, Hikma Ventures were, large institutional funds that were part of our Series A financing. And then also for us, we've had, dozens and dozens of, health system customers, again, about 20 studies or evaluations done. We've been actively selling in market. We have a proven business model that's scaling. So those are kind of similar points for a Series A. But it gets a bit complicated depending on like what type of business you are. So a Series A for a healthcare software company like ours, the milestones are going to be different than like a pharma company or a biotech company, even other things in healthcare. So all the things that I'll be sharing on this conversation now, then really are geared towards like health tech, healthcare software, just because it could be different for those other industries or other categories at least.
Yeah. Just a side question, going back to when you were saying in health tech and in this space, integration really matters, and it's quite a strong value point. Why is it so difficult for integrations to happen in health tech?
I would say a couple of things. I would say, number one, probably a key difference is that unlike in traditional, like other software that an organization uses where they have so many, right? So like imagine our company, right, Alan, like in our stack, we use, I don't know, like Outlook for email, we use Slack for communication, Word for type, whatever it is, right? I think with that large healthcare system or hospital, they have like one major operating system, which is the electronic health record, which is complicated, workflows and interfaces and all of that. So I think number one is it's because they're so complicated, they're not designed to have very straightforward integrations. Although that's changed recently with things like Smart on Fire and Epic has App Orchard and Cerner has their code program. But so then the second reason why now, even with those integration ecosystems that Epic and Cerner have, the second reason is hard. Those are not completely open ecosystems, right? So I'm going to guess for the most part that most companies, if they look up the documentation, they can integrate with Slack or Outlook or some other things there. But Epic and Cerner are a lot more, for example, selective, right? So to even get onto their integration ecosystems like Epic App Orchard, as a company, we have to actually go through a vetting process. So we have to actually get our security infrastructure vetted, our UI UX vetted, the integrations that we create with them have to be validated and tested. And so that's like a multi-month process they have to go to. But before they'll even start that process with us, we have to be accepted. And I think, and part of getting accepted into these integration ecosystems has been actually having large customers of Epic or Cerner advocating for the integration. Because you can imagine if you're Epic or Cerner, you care about the quality of partners that you bring into the
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem, and a kind of a signal for, is this a high quality partner to bring in, is, do I have a large health system on Epic or Cerner who's saying, hey, please integrate with SeamlessMD?
Right.
If there isn't, and you don't have customers advocate for that integration, like, why would Epic or Cerner spend time? There's like
Right.
hundreds or thousands of companies that would want that integration done, but they have to prioritize where they spend their resources. And so
Mm-hmm.
it makes it particularly hard to integrate in this environment.
Right. So then when you did go and raise the Series A for SeamlessMD, what particular milestones were important to highlight, and which milestones had SeamlessMD achieved by that point?
Yeah, so it's definitely some of the ones that we've talked a bit about already. So it's the fact that we had, about about 20 or so clinical studies or evaluations done, and done by credible organizations, right? So these are academic hospitals who've done, studies that have been either published or presented at conferences, have had abstracts and posters. And it wasn't us doing the studies; it was these hospitals doing the studies. And not only did they do these studies, because you could have dozens of studies that have poor results. It's like, no, these are studies showing major reductions in readmissions, length of
Mm-hmm.
stay, ER visits, SNF use, costs, etc. So that gives healthcare officials a lot of confidence that, okay, like, this solution and this approach is repeatable, the value is repeatable, it actually works. I think a second thing that mattered, we talked again, was the integrations.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that we had, so many, not only the fact that we had done the integrations with Epic or Cerner directly, that was definitely like a really exciting thing for investors. But the fact that we have like all these customers who've actually deployed the integration, and so it worked, it's in market, there's clear proof points, and it's valuable to them. I would say a third thing that was important was the fact that we've demonstrated a repeatable business model, right? So one of the challenges in healthcare, and there's a graveyard of healthcare companies where you get pilots done, and lots of
Mm-hmm.
hospitals are happy to do research trials and pilots, but they don't convert to paid customers, and
Right.
not only contracts that get renewed, but also the fact that the contracts actually grow. So what investors really liked about our product was that, and our business was that, hey, actually, our pilots converted to paying health system customers. Oh, and these customers are actually growing their use of Seamless to more and more departments or verticals inside the organization. Whereas they've seen so many companies, frankly, even companies in our space, Alan, that have unfortunately died off because they were stuck in like pilotitis and
Mm-hmm.
just weren't able to actually convert. And I think one of the things that I've learned in healthcare is that it's hard enough to build a product that works technically. It's even harder to build a product in healthcare that actually drives health outcomes and cost savings.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's even harder to not only do that, but be able to build a sales and marketing engine that actually turns those outcomes into actual like paying customers. And it's not easy to do all three of those things,
Mm-hmm.
but we demonstrate our ability to do those things. And so I think all that put together were really key, milestones that they looked at, which again, I think it sounds pretty straightforward, but in healthcare, those things are certainly not easy.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned, using the Series A funding for, let's say, like building out a repeatable sales and marketing engine. And it's a bit of an interesting balance here, because in order to get those great health outcomes and better cost savings for the hospital, it's not just about a fancy looking product that works well. There's an actual design process in the back end. For SeamlessMD specifically, that's a very clinical approach. And so, was there a particular focus for the Series A that you were explaining to investors? Here's how we would be using the funds above and beyond just sales and marketing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple of things. I mean, one is definitely sales and marketing, and grow out the business, and that's always going to be part of an expectation of how you use Series A funds, because they certainly want to see top line numbers grow in the company. So are we increasing our health system customer base faster than we otherwise would without the funding? Is revenue growing? That's always going to matter for Series A and beyond, for sure. But I think a second thing for us is, they also know that to continue growing our leadership, that involves growing our product leadership.
Right.
So it's the fact that we're continuing to grow out the number of different clinical use cases in the platform, doing deeper and deeper integrations with health records and other systems, and then also kind of building even more proprietary things to our platform around some of the machine learning and AI work that we're doing. So definitely investing in R&D and advancing the product is certainly also a core part of it, because also, I mean, you could argue if you advance the product roadmap, that also grows the financial part of the business too, because you can, deploy more parts of the organization, you have a more valuable product, all kinds of other things. So it all ties together.
Right.
And I think people realize, especially in the software world, this is not like a pharmaceutical drug where we have like the one drug and now we're just trying to like sell more of the drug. It's like, no, actually the software is like a living, growing organization that we keep, or organism that we keep iterating and improving and advancing, because we know that as an innovative company, like, we can't be complacent. We know that we have to keep helping our health system partners achieve more, do better, and we have to kind of maintain our lead from a product point of view. So investors know that we can't be complacent. We can't just focus on selling what we currently do. We have to think about, where's the market going to be 5-10 years from now, and are we ensuring that our product roadmap continues to grow along with the fact that the market's going to grow as well.
Right. I'm curious about, I've heard this term before, smart money or strategic investing. How do you view strategic investing or smart money as opposed to other funds, or how do you kind of value the importance or weigh the importance of a strategic partner when you're looking at venture capital?
Yeah, and I think when people raise capital for the first time, there's a very common phrase that almost like a trap that you can fall into. I think the phrase is something like "all money is green."
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if you're desperate for money, it's easy to fall into believing that phrase. But what people don't realize is that if you raise capital, you're not just raising money, you're actually bringing a partner into the company, right? So, at the very least, any investor is going to have access to the mind share of the company, particularly like in my case, the CEO, right? Because they're like, I directly would interface with investors even after we close the financing round, right? So they become a partner to the company, they become a team member of the company. And the difference though is that it's a team member that like you're married to, right?
Mm.
So, if you brought someone onto the company and it was a bad fit for both parties, you can part ways pretty easily. It's really hard to part ways as an investor. There's ways to do it, but it's not as simple, right?
Mm.
And so you have to think about the fact that you're gonna be married basically for a long time. And so, what you don't want is an investor who like detracts from the business, right? Who distracts or pushes the company in the wrong direction. And so it's very important that you find, I don't know if I'd call it smart money, but at the very least, it's like you want someone who is aligned with the company. At the very least aligned. Best case scenario, they can actually add a lot of value and help the company.
Right.
But every investor plays a different role, right? So maybe certain investors can help with recruiting, some can help with product, right? Maybe sometimes some of the best investors are the ones who are just great cheerleaders,
Mm.
right? Who could say, hey, Alan, like good job doing this. Like, congrats on this. Like, honestly, like that sounds simple, but you'd be surprised. Like a lot of times, like as a CEO, not many people are actually, it's not like if I'm your boss, right? Hopefully you're getting kudos from me every now and then, right? But like normally if you're the CEO, like there's no one there who's part of their job is to give you kudos, right?
Right.
And be like, hey, like, man, that was tough, but you did that part well. Like, good job there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that like I wake up wanting those things, but you'd be surprised when things are really tough. Sometimes someone just saying, hey, like as an investor, like I know this is tough, but man, like we're really proud of you for this thing that the team did. That's what matters, even if it's not adding to the product or sales or anything like that. People would be surprised. All kinds of help. Moral support even is really helpful from an investor.
Yeah. I think one thing that I know from our investors, just even their willingness and not even just willingness, but they go out of their way to talk about some of their portfolio companies because there's a genuine passion there. There's a genuine excitement for the future. And I understand, it's a portfolio company. So of course they're going to want to talk about it. But at the same time, it's usually they have an interest in this space, and they really are forward thinking in that this is the future, and here's why, and they love explaining that, and they love talking about it and sharing it, which I think is really awesome as well. And that kind of fits in with, those would probably be the best cheerleader types as well, because they are just focused on what that brighter future is, and here's how we can bridge that gap. When you're actually raising the Series A, is it important to have an exit strategy already planned out and proposed in the discussions with your pitch, for instance?
Yeah, so it's funny. I would say people, every investor has mixed feedback on that. Even at the Series A or not, there are certain investors who care a lot about having a clear, at least some sense of what an exit could look like, because they end up doing some like back of the napkin calculations at least. There are others who would actually strongly disagree and say, if you have a clear exit plan for this, that means you're actually not like being ambitious enough in the growth of the company, and you might be working towards a mediocre exit instead of trying to swing for the fences, right? So, and again, like that's just different investors had different perspectives on this. I didn't have the philosophy that if we focus on building a great company and creating a lot of value for customers and partners, that will create great shareholder value as well, and that will lead to a good exit, whatever that might be. Some people would disagree. Some people would say, no, you have to work towards a specific exit. Like, I don't believe that philosophy. But what's more important is, like, do your investors align with that philosophy? Right. So an investor who would say, well, actually, no, I want to invest in a company where I know that in 2 years you're going to get me an exit. Well, that might not be the right investor for you. Right. Or it might be the right investor for you, depending on what your goals are. Right. So, and I think it's one of those things where, and I think this is true, not just for raising capital, but I think, Alan, you were talking this morning about, like hiring, right? It's like the more transparent we can be in our conversations, then to not only find out if we are aligned, but to find out if we're not aligned, the better it's going to be, right? Like the worst thing would be we don't talk about these things because we're afraid of disappointing the other person. And then 2 years on the line, the investor's like, oh, I kind of hoped you would exit by now. And you're like, well, I never like said that, right? Same with hiring, right? It's like setting clear expectations about like what's going to happen in this role. Like, how do you work with the team? And it's easy to say, oh, I'm going to hide my weaknesses. I'm going to hide my quirks because I don't want, Josh or Alan to not like offer me the job. But it's like, well, wouldn't you want to know earlier if it's not the right fit? Because then if you join the company and you're not a fit, then we've wasted your time too. So I think in the investing relationship, it's a bit of a game, but I always lean towards more transparency is better. And you know what? If that means that you end up finding out for me that we're not the right fit for you as an investor, that's probably a good thing for both of us.
Especially to know up front.
Yeah, you don't want to marry someone that you regret marrying.
Yeah. 50% of marriages end in divorce.
Not topic on that though, Alan. I mean, I actually believe that people change too. So
totally, yeah.
I mean, I think we've talked about this, right? But if people live till they're 500 years old, I don't think it's crazy if people like relationships like fizzle out at, even the best relationships are going to fizzle out at like maybe at 100 years old. I don't know. Who knows? But,
or evolve into something else. Yeah, I mean, the other way to look at it is 50% of marriages succeed as well. So,
well, I'm more curious about like the ones that don't work out. What's the distribution of time in that relationship? Like if it was 50% stop working after 50 years, that's not the actual number. That's probably way off, right? But like
it's probably like 1 year.
That's actually not bad. That's actually pretty good. If it was like, oh, the average divorce happens after 1 year, I'd be like, oh, 1 year. That's pretty short.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone's got to do research on that. Someone's got one of the listeners has got to like do that work for us, Alan, and then like send us an email and let us know what that distribution looks like of divorce.
That's true. Yeah, I'm curious, Josh. Have you? And I know I haven't prepared this question for you, so I understand if you can't think of an answer super quick off the top of your head. But has there been any advice from investors that typically sticks out in your mind and you carry with you, and maybe you've heard it in your earlier days or maybe more recently, but has there been one or two pieces of advice that have really stuck with you?
Really stuck with me?
Yeah, not just for like a week and you've thought about it and you don't remember it anymore. But
Yeah, I think one that comes to mind, it really focuses on customer centricity. So one of our investors, I think he uses the phrase, when you're thinking about um, feedback from stakeholders in the company. I think he said something like, listen to customers first, followed by domain experts, um, then followed by investors and your own mother, is what he said. And I
yeah.
think his point is that, um, investors are like some of the most far removed people from the day to day of the business.
Hmm.
And even though investors try to help and they'll always, a lot of them will give advice, the best investors realize that they have like 0.1% of the context that people in the company do about the business, about the customer and what's going on. And so they can provide experience. They can say, hey, Alan, in a similar situation, this happened. But often, if they try to give you prescriptive or authoritative advice on like, this is what you have to do, it's often going to be the wrong advice because, and it's well intentioned,
Hmm.
but it's often the wrong advice because they don't have the same context that you do as a company. And so again, customer feedback matters most, followed by domain experts who've been there, done it in your industry, followed by investors and your own mother. Um, so I thought that was actually really, really refreshing to hear from an investor.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably a very self-aware investor as well, who's maybe been through the journey themselves and understands kind of what it takes to build something. I'm curious about personalities in investors. Are they all kind of, have you found like the investors that you seem to attract are all kind of the same personality, or are they all quite different? And how do you view that in terms of, is it a strength? Is it a weakness?
Yeah, I would say what I found very common among investors, particularly those who focus on health tech, is that they are number one, they care a lot about the mission and the impact of the company. So the reason why they're investing in healthcare in the first place is because they really care about human health and human prosperity. So for them, the financial outcome doesn't matter because they're investors, but the
Mhm.
social impact matters too. Otherwise, they would invest in other industries
More
that be
lucrative. Yeah.
easier to get a great return on, right?
Right.
I would say probably a second thing is that they're very long-term thinkers. They know that healthcare has its own unique challenges, and that there's lots of barriers and things take longer in healthcare. Like sales cycles are longer if you're selling to hospitals than other types of organizations. But they also see the upside in that, where because it's so hard to get into healthcare, once you've established and you've built your brand and you've built your network of customers and partners, you'll last a long time because it's so hard to even enter healthcare. And so they realize there's a lot of barriers to entry, but then once you've overcome some of those barriers, there's a lot of upside into the company. But you can only reap those rewards if you have a long-term view in healthcare and are willing to be patient and give companies the opportunity to actually get past those barriers and grow.
Yeah. The last question that I had is around how you go about finding these investors and venture capital firms. Is it based on your network that you have before? Is there cold outreach? What's the process there when you're looking at a Series A and beyond?
Yeah, I would say it's a bit of everything, and I don't think there's one right answer for this. I will say that, for most of the investors that we've raised capital from, especially in the Series A, it was from people that we have developed, a relationship with over time, right? I don't think we had too many investors where, we just met them a month or two ago, and then all of a sudden they're investors. Probably more so those who were near the end of the close of the round, who kind of got in when everyone else was already in. But for a lot of our significant, largest investors, these were relationships that developed over time, and those came from different ways. Some were introductions, some were mentoring relationships that turned into an investor relationship. Some just like in the past, I think probably found us from a mutual contact or maybe online. And so I don't think there, and some we've met, I code outreach to people, right? For example, so all that works. But I would say definitely the relationship over time matters.
Hmm.
because one of the phrases people use is that investors tend to invest in lines, not dots. So the point is that investors gain confidence when they see what the team has accomplished over time, right? So it's like, okay, number one, if there's time, then it means you build a relationship, and it's like the longer you know someone, the more trust you have. You get the sense of, do I like them? Do I enjoy working with them? Would I be excited to partner with them formally? And so you need time to do that. But also, it's like, okay, well, this is where Alan, Josh, and Seamless were, 4 months ago, 8 months ago, 12 months ago. These are the things that they were working on. What have they accomplished in the last 4, 8, 12
Hmm.
months, right? Did they actually accomplish any meaningful improvements in the company, or did it kind of just like peter patter out, right? And so people want to invest in lines, they want to invest in velocity, right? And you need time to see if those things are actually happening. And so I think a lot of it comes from time and relationships.
Hmm.
There's always exceptions to that, but I think in healthcare in particular, because there's so much risk in healthcare early on, people want to see those lines.
Right. And I think that also it makes a lot of sense, kind of circling back to what you were saying about long-term thinking, long-term on the business and for the goal. It's long-term thinking with long-term relationships and long-term goals with long-term players. And that's how you kind of play this game in healthcare and healthcare technology.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, even when we think about our partners, a lot of our customers that we work with today were people that we met a year ago, sometimes even 2 years ago, because it wasn't the right time.
Right.
But they really value the relationship that they have with
Hmm.
us.
Yeah, well, even and we've talked about them on a previous podcast, but even hospital partners who switch to a different hospital. Like, let's say the president, for instance, at St. Francis Hospital was at another customer site of ours and had great results there, and so they're going to bring us. They brought us in at St. Francis when he moved, and so it's again long-term relationships with people and delighting the customer and always putting the customer first is going to yield results like that long term across the. Doesn't matter if it's the same hospital or another system. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any closing thoughts on Series A funding and anything else? If I were another health tech CEO and I'm looking to potentially raise my Series A or go beyond just my seed funding, do you have any closing thoughts for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is what I think I probably said the same thing during the other podcast on seed financing, but repeat it because I think it's worth repeating. It's a numbers game. It really is. I mean, if you're lucky, if you're one of the few companies where you don't have to talk to that many investors to find the right ones. But for most companies, you have to talk to a lot of people. And it's just like sales, right? You should expect no's from most investors because they're not the right fit for whatever reason, and you just got to be resilient. Just keep picking up the phone, or I guess in our world, like keep zooming or something.
Right.
And usually, like, people often ask, well, like, oh, has this changed during the pandemic? We actually closed our Series A in the middle of the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Um, people are a lot more. People are very comfortable investing after virtual meetings. I don't think. I think people realize I mean, in person is always nice,
Hmm.
but as long as you have video, you can build a relationship with people. You can maintain relationships. Like, I certainly have investors that we've never physically met in person,
Hmm.
and it's okay. But I definitely think, like, you have to invest that time. You have to pound the payment, and you got to at least build relationships to things like video. And you do that, and you put in the effort. Most people can get there, but I think most people like don't. If they don't get there, maybe there's problems with the business, but part of it's just like giving up too soon.
Yeah.
Raising capital is not easy. For a very small percentage of companies, it is. For most companies, it's not easy.
Right. Yep. That's great. And again, if there's any specific questions that are more tailored to your actual business and you want to learn more about that, feel free to get in contact with us. Josh, I'm sure would appreciate speaking to specifics as opposed to just the theoretical approach on these questions. But Josh, I've learned a lot today on raising a Series A. So uh, I hope that our listeners also found value in this episode, and if so, let us know. And when we go ahead with SeamlessMD and raise future rounds, maybe a Series B, Series C if needed, we'll go ahead and open up an episode on those topics as well, if there's anything that changes at that point.
Awesome. Alan, thank you so much for the chat. Enjoyed as always. And yeah, hit us up with the questions.
Yeah, amazing. And let's see if this episode can top our 8 million from the previous episode on views. If we can hit 10 million this time, that would be fantastic as well. So share the episode around. If you or your friend or someone in your family is working at a health tech company or building a health tech company, go ahead and share this episode with them so they can learn more too.
Yeah, I don't know what dashboards you're looking at to get to those numbers, but please send them afterwards. I'm really stoked to see where all these 8 million people are coming from.
I will. I might have to fudge a few numbers first, but I'll send those dashboards over.
What's Photoshop for if you can't fudge these numbers?
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thanks, Josh. I will talk to you next time.
Thanks, Alan. Have a good rest of the day.